pleasure to meet all at last, and welcome back to films I should have talked about years ago. And so, let's go ahead and get moving with some more material. Today we're going to be talking a bit about a shark movie. Yeah. And you're probably thinking that there's so many of them to choose from that you have no idea which one I'm talking about, but hey, that's why there's a title in this video. Today it's going to be about The Meg. Yeah, of all the different shark films that exist, there are tons of them. So much so, James Rolfe of Cinemassacre Video made a huge countdown video. Over 50 shark movies have been covered. And they are in fact seen as the worst, in all seriousness. A good majority of which were there primarily to cash in on the success of Jaws, 1975. Along with the sequels that it managed to bring in. But in this case, The Meg is simply about the Megalodon, a completely different species of shark. It's basically if you took the great white and multiplied its size to be around 60 feet in length, as opposed to the usual 15 to 20 that you might get in a real great white shark. But what I'd have to say about this in all seriousness is that The Meg is, simply put, a unique way to describe the Megalodon as not only the perfect apex predator in the ocean, but it also can serve as a hefty reminder that all of us out there, we don't have to necessarily worry about Megalodons actually surviving out in today's oceans. Or maybe we would. We just have yet to see what the heck's going on out there. The Atlantic, Pacific, Indian, Arctic, probably the rest as well. Every single body of water happens to have a surprise in and of itself. Of course, you remember with the original 1916 shark attacks, Matawan Creek happened to be one of the biggest spots, the biggest significance possible, as to the many attacks that happened with one particular great shark. The sea wolf, as it was nicknamed, basically traveled miles up the creek itself. This is something that sharks aren't normally capable of doing, at least on their own. At some point it could be an involuntary thing, but hey, the point is that, well, it's just that. The Megalodon, however, is a whole different algorithm. A game changer unlike anything we've ever seen in our whole lives. So much so, that's why I'm here to specifically to talk about it. In this film, we have ourselves the likes of Jason Statham. The same old Jason Statham all the way out in England, blah blah blah. English version of Dwayne Johnson. I mean, this was basically a little while before Hobbs and Shaw, but in a way, it's kind of a neat way to simply utilize one good actor out there from overseas. But I really should elaborate on the plot itself. Jason Statham basically is a former vessel operator. He himself, unfortunately, is trying to cope with trauma that he had from an accident, which we could see during the opening scene in this movie. After some time passes, it pretty much seems that his services are needed. So the superiors of an underwater organization, a large company that specializes in collecting stuff from the bottom of the ocean itself, and also on the verge of something incredibly big. Basically, a small submersible has actually broken through a barrier that happens to serve as a gateway to a unique underwater world that sits in the bottom of the actual ocean. When they discover this, however, a real problem emerges. The craft itself loses contact with HQ, and the crew aboard it try to do anything that they can to get the systems back online, but it comes at a few costs. So in terms of the role that Statham himself provides, I can definitely tell you that it's probably not for the faint of heart. I mean, it's a unique, bone-chilling message. One with a very unique series of shark effects. You probably can't necessarily beat the likes of what the original Jaws animatronic sharks were like back in the day. But much like with what we should have expected, animatronics operating underwater, or anything that's robotic trying to operate underwater, in a way that try to mimic an actual great white shark's movement, is more difficult to pull off than you might think. There were multiple animatronics built for the first Jaws movie, and there were also similar animatronics built for any and all Universal related attractions. So, of course, we don't necessarily get to see Jaws related stuff in Universal Studios much longer, but again, that's pretty much just the main problem there. However, in terms of how CG is put together, you could definitely get away with a lot of stuff. You could definitely make the movements seem more realistic and believable, but at the same time, maybe not so accurately. Because for one thing, there's actually a scene where a megalodon basically is swimming through the water alongside the underwater tunnel systems that are made entirely of glass. Yeah. Of all materials that ever existed, you got glass, a material that's easily destructible. But you know what? I probably wouldn't have it any other way. It just gives us a nice excuse to build up suspense and excitement in a way. To try and see if the main characters can make it out alive before water caves in all over the place and drowns everybody in the nick of time. So, I suppose that pretty much just covers that part. And I do have to mention the ending though. A pretty unique way that they actually somehow managed to recover the underwater craft that was trapped down in that area in the ocean. Yet at the same time, provide a really clever way to actually kill the shark. Yeah. It's quite a unique piece. But when you really think about it though, there's so many shark films out there. So many big time competitors that try to outclass the likes of Jaws, and many which seem to be wacky pieces that we never would have thought existed. But in this particular instance, it certainly does set itself as far away from the likes of those movies as much as possible. Particularly because it's not about a great white attacking people. It's about a megalodon attacking people. This is a whole different caliber here compared to a great white. And I probably couldn't have explained it any better than by talking about it here in this episode of Films I Should Have Talked About Years Ago. But yet, you want to know some real big news? They have a sequel in the works. That's right. The Meg 2, The Trench. It'll have a slated release on August 4th, 2023. It could most likely be subject to change amidst the many things that have gone on the past several years, but you never quite know. Maybe it might come out sooner or later. Maybe we might see it differently by the time the first trailer comes out for it. Whatever the case, it's probably going to be on par with the upcoming Christopher Nolan film known as Oppenheimer. No matter the case, I probably will talk about it when it comes out. But until then, I just don't see a whole lot of other reasons here. I don't see a bad cast by any means, and I certainly do see some pretty convincing action that happens. But the thing is, being trapped underwater, or basically in the ocean in general, it's a cliche that I've seen happen a little too many times by this point. It's not just Jaws, but it's also with such films like The Incredibles, Castaway, and even some others here and there. So the Meg basically gave us a bit of a different outlook on that part. But it also gave us something new to be afraid of. If you thought that the shark from Jaws was undeniably terrifying on screen, eating people alive right there out of the water, dragging them below the surface, and turning the water red, well, take a look at the Meg. Watch how the greatest, most apex predator ever in the ocean could terrorize the crap out of humanity. So what's my score on this? Well, 6.8 is probably what I give it. It's a bit more higher than what you would have expected from the average critter of any sorts. The critter that makes a lot of criticism. And I could be specifying a lot of different things like Rotten Tomatoes, IMDb, Metacritic, or any of the rest. But here's my suggestion. Please like, subscribe, comment, follow me on social media, and stay on the Hollywood side if you'd like to see more on my channel.